The 540 is brought to you by StarCityGames.com weekly sale. Head on over to StarCityGames.com/sale because this week you can bet your bottom dollar you're going to save a bunch of cash with our $1 sale. Now until August 30th at 10:59 a.m. Eastern Time, select Magic the Gathering products are on sale for just $1 now through Monday. Chuck in $1, get a bunch of stuff for your commander deck or cube. You never know what you can find. Everything on sale for $1 now through August 30th at 10:59 a.m. Head on over to StarCityGames.com/sale. The 540 is also brought to you by Coalesce Apparel and Design. If you want to get the coolest Magic t-shirts and hoodies and stickers, go to coalesceapparel.shop. And if you find something you like, use gift code SCG to save 10% off at checkout. That's coalesceapparel.shop. Nobody made what they wanted, so they made it themselves.
What's up, everybody? Cedric Phillips here, stopping by real quick to let you know about one of Star City Games' newest podcasts, The Receivables, hosted by yours truly, alongside my partner in crime, of course, Patrick Sullivan, where the two of us discuss Magic sets, both past and present, from top to bottom. On every episode of The Receivables, you're going to hear us talk about the facts of a set, the mechanics of a set, the cycles of a set, the boring stuff, before we get into some crazy stories of when we were playing Magic during the times that the set was legal. We've got a ridiculous award show where we give out awards like the Char Rumbler Award for weirdest card in a set, the Oko Thief of Crowns Award for best card in the set, and a whole bunch more, before we finally decide, hey, what card won the set and what letter grade should we give the set? It's a whole lot of fun. We're having a blast recording them. Hopefully you have the opportunity to listen to it and you enjoy it as much as we're enjoying recording them. Where can you find it? StarCityGames.com or wherever else you listen to your podcast. The Receivables every single week here at SCG.
Welcome back, one and all, to the 540, your favorite cube podcasts in theory. Maybe not in practice. Either way, I'm Justin Parnell. You can find me AJ Parnell1 on Twitter, and my partner in crime,
Ryan Overturf. You can find me at Ryan Overdrive on Twitter. This is certainly my favorite cube podcast. I tune in every week.
Yeah, that's true. And there's something to be said for that.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency and making sure that you're listening. I would say that I'm also a big fan. I listen almost every week, most weeks. There's probably been a week or two I've skipped it. I don't remember a whole lot of last week, but I'm sure that I was there.
You were. I can confirm that you were there.
Okay, great. Anyway, I'm feeling much better, so I will be trying to steer the ship and not be passed out on the ground while Ryan frantically tries to do both of our jobs. So
I think that there is a version of a podcast that I could do solo, but I don't think people would listen for the content. I think that I would be driven by appreciating the spectacle of a weirdo making conversation with himself. But
it's the art of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the process. Yeah. So this week, well, I say this, but I know that what we're going to be talking about this week is doing a triple Magic the Gathering online cube retrospective. We have 3 cubes that have appeared on Magic Online, and we are going to go through all of them. Again, this is something that we do like to do because it's great to look at cubes that are, especially ones that are outside the norm, see what we might be able to learn as both players for playing these cubes and cubes designers for including cards or things that these cubes might be doing. So this is always just a fun thing to kind of go down and do. And this week we have 3, I would say, fairly different cubes from each other, which is maybe more different than any set of 3 cubes that we reviewed in the past.
Yeah, there's a pretty wide spread here. I really like it. when we see a new Spotlight cube on Magic Online. One of these is a reappearance of a cube we've seen before, though the changes were very significant. So even that was kind of a fresh experience as well. And it was cool to see the evolution of somebody else's cube as someone who has spent a lot of time refining my own projects and just appreciating how much work goes into something like that. And I love it when you see a new cube and get someone's experience, like their perspective, and you get an idea for what they love about Magic. And it was great during a lot of early COVID when Magic Online just had the vintage cube just all the time. But the vintage cube is just one cube. It's probably the most played cube in all of Magic. I think it just is the most played cube in all of Magic, arguably the most beloved. But it's just one experience. And for me, the pool of what cube can be is much more interesting than the pool of what cube currently is.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it. You know, we talk a lot on this podcast, primarily focusing on like more traditional cubes, not because we're have the mindset of kind of the narrowness of that's all that exists, but just because, that is for better or worse, that is the most common type of cube, is kind of just straightforward. You have all 5 colors. They're all pretty much evenly distributed. They're doing more straightforward things that colors are known for. That's not a bad thing. I would say that 99.9% of people that have played Cube, that was their first experience with Cube, and that's probably what got them to love the format in the first place, right?
Right.
So, but it is nice when we have a set of cubes that deviate from that, and it's really like it's such, I don't know. I think it's just such a special play experience to have something that is not normal, and maybe normal is not the right word, but not traditional, not what people would expect when they think of a cube. But from an experience perspective, it feels just as much like a cube as any other cube you've ever drafted.
Yeah, it really heightens the creative expression. The first cube we're going to be talking about today is Autumn Burchette's Bant cube, and Autumn is somebody whose love for Magic is infectious. I was privileged to be able to cover some of Autumn's matches when we were running the SCG tour online, and she's just always just really into the games. You can tell from the way she talks about the decks that she's played. I loved watching her. I wasn't covering this tournament, obviously, but the Mythic Championship that she won with Mono Blue Curious Obsession, the Mono Blue aggro deck, was awesome to watch, and hearing her talk about that after the fact. And the decks that I got to cover Autumn playing are actually decks that I just despise. I actually can't stand Wilderness Reclamation, Nexus of Fate, but it still was a treat to cover Autumn playing those decks, because I know that Autumn liked them a lot. And for Autumn, it wasn't just going through the motions, this is the good deck, I have to play it. It was all right, this is my shit, I'm in the zone, which is really awesome to cover.
It's a little bit different when you get to watch a master, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Even if you're I don't like this, but man, do I appreciate it. And Autumn, I think it is not a stretch to say they're one of the best Magic players in the world. So taking a mind that is described, that I would describe as one of the best Magic players in the world, and then translating it to what does this come up with for a cube? It would be pretty tough for it not to be great.
Yeah, and Autumn's perspective here, if you go and read their article on the Mothership, do we call it the Mothership? You know what I mean when I say that.
Yes.
Is that still common?
I believe it is, but I don't. I'm glad you asked, because I 100% knew what you were talking about, and I think older crotchety listeners probably knew, but younger people probably have no idea what that means.
I was going to write the Mothership in an article recently, and I had the thought, do people know that? And rather than ask anybody, I just rewrote what I was writing. But the Mothership used to, and maybe still commonly, just refers to the Wizards' main Magic website. Yeah, you get there
I think it's wizards.magic.com.
If you type magicthegathering.com, it redirects, which is how I get there. Anyway.
It is wizards.com/magic.
Okay.
No. Magic.wizards.com is what it is. That was correct. I was right on the first one. Magic.wizards.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
The mothership. Now you understand why they call it the mothership.
Now you can call it the mothership, and you can snobbily turn your nose up at someone that doesn't understand it.
But when I first started working on Grixis Cube, and then when I got to share that on Magic Online, my perspective was largely like, I don't think white aggressive decks or green ramp decks add anything to high-powered cubes that you can't get with Grixis cards and artifacts, whereas Autumn's perspective was very different.
Yeah.
The Bant colors allow you to really hone in on a lot of build-around cards, facilitate a lot of turn-to-turn engine building style decks, and just Autumn liking the gameplay, where I was kind of taking an experience that existed. You know, we were talking about how a lot of our focus is on the Magic Online Vintage Cube, and I was doing that, or the Legacy Cube, and kind of boiling that down to make that experience or a similar experience more compelling and engaging for me. Whereas Autumn is doing away with two of the more interactive colors in Magic. I was actually thinking about this. I don't really know how you would rank them, but I think everyone can agree that green is Magic's least interactive color.
Yeah.
Green is largely doing its own thing, and you can kind of rank the other four colors because white actually does interact quite a bit.
Well,
you have a lot
white does interact, but the cards that traditionally make it into cube are not interactive because they're generally not very good.
You get a good clip, like Swords, Plow, Oblivion Ring, but you are right.
Going to run out very fast.
You are right. The white column is largely creatures that attack and block, and planeswalkers. But anyway, maintaining green as one of your three colors, you're saying, okay, I don't necessarily care as much about interaction. I want people to build cool engines, which is a very different experience from Grixis Cube.
Yes, it is. It is a lot more of decks. What it looks like, a lot more of decks operating in isolation from each other, because you have two colors that I think traditionally interact the least. I think white's more common interaction is kind of the like mass interaction, you know, as far as like powerhouse like things that you can do in Cube Go, which is going to be, you know, doing sweepers and Armageddon effects. And I want to note those are not present in this cube.
Yeah, that's a big thing to notice about white. You don't get Wrath of God, you don't get Day of Judgment. You have to go, there is Supreme Verdict, but you have to be blue-white to play that. So it's more a sport-specific thing. And also the volume is just lower. And then Settle the Wreckage is in the cube. That's another one that I don't like. But again, because it's Autumn, I'll allow it. Then there's a 5-mana sweeper too, right? Terminus is in the cube, so a 6-mana sweeper,
which is 6, which is a pretty big difference.
And Hour of Revelation also. I played 7 or 8 drafts of the cube. I never saw anyone casting Hour of Revelation, but I did get Terminus pretty badly.
Yeah, I think the largest sweeper in the cube is Parallax Wave, which one I'm all for that. But 2, it is me calling that a sweeper is ambitious at best. But that is really the thing that you can play on curve to clear up creatures, I guess. But even still, I mean, this is a cube that the mass interaction that white has, which blue and green for the most part don't really have, is absent. So you are really letting people go wild. There are plenty of counterspells in blue. There's plenty of that. And it has certainly positioned itself as the absolute control color. That is generally the case in cubes already, but the dial, I will say that the dial is turned to 11 on counterspells and interaction for Autumn's Bant Cube.
Yeah, and that actually opened up some really interesting, almost rock, paper, scissory elements of the cube, where the blue decks had access to a bunch of cheap counter spells, and then the really effective late game ones like Cryptic Command and Sublime Epiphany. And I believe Mystic Confluence is here as well. No, it's not. It's in some of the other cubes we're going to talk about today. But Sublime Epiphany, still very good late game counter there. And
there's plenty of 2 and 3 mana ones.
Yes, yeah, a very healthy clip of that. And so it made it so the aggressive decks went way under the blue decks. And because of the dearth of sweepers and there only being so many removal spells, a lot of the games actually ended up being kind of about blocking. The extreme case of that is creatures that often are not long for the battlefield ended up being very significant players. I think Hex Drinker is generally a very good cube card, but in Bant Cube, I saw it get to 8 almost every time I saw it cast.
Yeah, because there's like you can do before that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's very minimal interaction.
Also, there's like an artifact beatdown theme that extends into some of the white artifact cards. A card that is okay in these decks, it's like really important, and when it works out is very powerful, is Steel Overseer. That card, you just got to activate it multiple times more often than not in this cube, which is a really cool difference from other cubes that have employed the artifact beatdown deck.
I think another thing that I like is there is not a shying away from just all of the best multicolored cards, like the 2-color cards for each color combination appear in this cube, with the exception of like I don't know, Teferi Hero of Dawn. Teferi Planeswalkers.
I was gonna say I'm looking for what's the busted blue-white one? Let me go over to Classic Cube real quick. Fractured Identity is not in the cube. So we don't go all the way up.
Okay, that's fair.
So there's certainly not, outside of extreme power level outliers, any shying away from power. And this is another one of those cards that I mentioned in my preview article for this cube that really is a lot more powerful here than it usually is. A Spell Queller, which is a card that doesn't make it in a lot of cubes because it just dies a lot, but it doesn't really die in this cube.
A 2/3 for 3 counterspell.
Yeah. So there's some really cool differences there. Monastery Mentor is another one of those creatures that you got to be scared when your opponent casts that in this cube. I mean, you usually are scared, but you just kill it in the other cubes more often.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was like, I'm scared 100% of the time when people cast this card, but usually I have more agency over whether it gets to stay around or not.
The topic of Monastery Mentor, and I mentioned Untitled Wreckage. I'm just going to kind of pepper in stories from playing these cubes as I deem appropriate, if that works for you.
I love it.
I drafted a blue-white Monastery Mentor kind of deck, and I was playing this game where I knew one of the cards in my opponent's hand. I like bounced a creature or something, and they just didn't recast it when they had 5 mana or 6 mana. I believe it was Elite Guard Mage, the 4 mana 2/3. Yes, it was Elite Guard Mage, because it was good for me to bounce it despite it having a good enter the battlefield ability. And they just like had 6 mana and didn't recast it. And I had Monastery Mentor and I started accruing some tokens. And I just got to this point where they just didn't cast their Guard Mage. I had 3 Mentor tokens that could attack that turn. And my opponent was at 13, and I pumped them up so that the tokens all combined were attacking for 12. And I just hung the Mentor back. So I'm just like, I know you have Settled the Wreckage. It's obvious that you have Settled the Wreckage. The card is never going to get me. And then they just like Settle the Wreckage as my 3 tokens instead of going to 1, and I just like won the next turn.
Yeah. I was wondering where this story was going to go, and I if I could have paused time, I would have maybe said, what percentage chance is this story being just about Settle the Wreckage? And it would have been a double-digit percentage. I'm not sure exactly where, but I think I would have figured it out had I given myself a little more time.
Yeah, and my cube designs and what I like about Magic, as I've said, they're not going to overlap a ton with Autumn's designs and what Autumn likes about Magic. So you can make an argument that that's more desirable than Wrath of God, if that's what you're into. But for me, that kind of it's a Settle the Wreckage thing. I just feel like people play it when it's just not that good.
Well, maybe that's why it's in here.
It could be for that reason. Yeah.
You know, you're in a position where there's no double-sided sweepers. There's very few planeswalkers.
It is true that basically any beatdown deck that I played that wasn't playing creatures that generated a ton of value I think in the beatdown mirrors is actually probably where it's most compelling to have Settle the Wreckage, where you're just in a damage race and you just can't hold back.
Yeah, and you just get to take it. Yeah, you don't. You're like, all right, I'll just push, and they're like, I'm not going to block, and you're like, great, and then they attack back, and then you're like, all right, well, I'll path to exile all of your creatures, and then you're dead.
Yeah, it can definitely be significant there, and that's something that I was scared of that didn't come up when I was playing the cube. Though when you just put the list out there, you're not really in control of how people utilize the cards, and I think that Settle the Wreckage really tricks some people some of the time. That's my stance on the card, and it always will be.
Yeah, I just I guess it's funny to me because I'm just like, like I don't love the card, but I find myself to defend it when Ryan is just hammers it, and I don't even know why. I don't even really like Settle the Wreckage. In fact,
can't talk about Settle the Wreckage. It's not here to defend itself.
The person I've had the most conversations in my entire life with about Settle the Wreckage is Ryan on this podcast. So I don't know. It's just it makes me feel weird when I find myself in that scenario.
Well, and then on the other side, if you just lose a beatdown mirror to your opponent, Settle the Wreckage to Plague Wind you, that game sucks too. So
yes, yeah.
I don't like it, Justin.
You know what I do like, and that is the fact that this is a Bant cube, but there is a concerted effort to make a artifact, a colorless section as the like basically the de facto fourth color. Mm-hmm. You don't have as many cards here, but you have virtually zero virtually zero low impact cards. I would imagine that the rate of I talk about rate of play a lot. The rate of play for the artifacts in this cube is like astronomically high. Mm-hmm. Because in an 8-player draft, if you are just trying to just soak up basically every single artifact creature you can see and then supplement with, things that are colored, you could probably have quite a successful deck where you are majority colorless. If it works out to where there's a decent number of those cards in the draft.
Yeah, it's both true that the colorless artifact creatures present a pretty desirable archetype by virtue of a lot of those snowballing cards like Steel Overseer or Arcbound Ravager more often actually being able to convert some big modular turn than you would in a cube with black or red cards. That's compelling by itself. And also with blue just not being an aggressive color, if you want to facilitate aggressive decks, it is nice to just be able to dip into that colorless pool and say, okay, whatever color you're in, here's an avenue to be aggressive. And in fact, you do see some blue or blue X artifact beatdown decks facilitated cards like Master of Ethereum then, where blue would not normally be a very good aggressive color, which is pretty cool to see too.
Yeah. The blue-white artifact aggro deck seems like something that would be quite good, especially in this cube.
Yeah, he's got Urza on the 4, that card is really good.
Yeah, you're able to, that deck, I think more than most of the things that I'm looking at are able to really push power level for cards that are going to be less drafted, I would say, in most scenarios. Because it's, when you're limiting it to 3 colors, you are in a lot of cases just kind of saying, all right, well, this is what these colors are doing. Obviously they're doing multiple things. But it's one of the few legitimate multicolor archetypes that is pulling from a lot of different directions. and I quite like that. It's pushed pretty hard, and I would imagine that it's probably pretty successful when you're putting it together in a draft.
Yeah, and just all three colors offering kind of unique incentives for the artifact decks, with white having some cheap artifact creatures that go well there, blue having some bigger payoffs. Whirler Rogue is another really nice card, especially with how much this cube can lead the games where combats have relevant blockers that you have to get around, more so than other cubes with only so much interaction and sweepers. And then green, by the nature of the artifact aggressive deck, generally generating a lot of +1/+1 counters, having some synergies on that line there. So there's a lot of cool and unique ways for all three colors to dip into the artifact decks.
Yeah. I mean, blue has got some really, they have some sledgehammer cards for the artifact deck. They're all really at 4 mana, but like Master Transmuter, you already mentioned, Urza and Venser. Even something like Padim, where there's very minimal interaction for creatures. There's actually more ways to destroy artifacts and enchantments in this cube than there are creatures. So Padim is probably something that is wildly difficult to deal with. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I like having a cube that's able to take advantage of that subset of cards to an extreme degree.
Definitely, yeah. It makes the game about those, which is really nice. From my 7 or 8 drafts, I went 2-1 in all but one of them, which I actually think is kind of a ringing endorsement of the balance of the cube. Like, I tried a bunch of different things, and everything felt solid. I never played a deck where I felt like I was just crushing all my opponents. I did play some games that weren't close. That's going to happen sometimes. But I just kind of felt like no matter what I was doing, the decks were engaging with each other in meaningful ways. I've seen Autumn discuss on Twitter that Tolarian Academy is probably the big power level outlier that needs to go from the cube. But I think that's agreeable. That card, difficult to interact with, and when it's good, it does decide games. But
it's kind of one of those things, as I'm looking through this list, is like, well, there was an obvious effort to not have Gaia's Cradle, but the same effort wasn't taken to avoid Academy, which is not operating in that different of a space.
Right. And kind of the argument for trying this was you don't really see much in the way of mana rocks. You don't have signets and talismans in this cube. There's a little bit of it. You have Mox Opal.
You do have a Sapphire Medallion if you're mono blue.
You do have Sapphire
like
Medallion. The blue Storm deck, I never got an opportunity to draft it, but I saw a number of people posting 3-0s of that, and I could see maybe that deck kind of cleans up.
Yeah, that's because people don't post their 0-3s, Ryan.
That's definitely true. And you 0-3 when you draft Storm a lot, so that's a very good point.
But hey, that's the duality of man, right?
The one deck that I actually got the 3-0 with, my only non-2-1 record, was just a deck where I got the deck build. And this happens in these color restricted cubes sometimes, where I just had 30 playables. And I was like, I don't want to play every card I drafted, but at the same time, I don't want to make cuts. Fuck it, I'm going to companion Yorion. And so I just played like a 60 card Yorion deck where some of my cards just didn't really work with my other cards, but I just kind of drew the right ones in the right order. The second round, I actually, game 1, won the die roll, played turn 1 Arbor Elf, turn 2 Palladium Mirror, turn 3 Vorinclex, and my opponent conceded match, which ruled. They just conceded the whole match. So I got the 5-0 3-0 trophy.
not only that, if they're conceding the match in game 1, they're logging off and they're not playing Magic for the rest of the day.
No. That's enough Magic for at least today. We'll reevaluate in the morning.
Yes, exactly. So I have a couple of thoughts here. One, I just want to note that I think if I was ranking all of the 3 color combinations in Magic, Bant would be my least favorite. Second least favorite. Ooh. That's not true.
I was going to say, it can't be your least favorite.
It's my second least favorite. No, there's a clear there's one that is my least favorite by like leaps and bounds.
I think that it's really difficult for Bant to be anybody's least favorite because Bant is so inoffensive. Even if you don't find it cool, what could possibly really bother you about Bant is my position.
It doesn't. That's the thing. Yeah, it's my second least favorite. And it's because of that. It's because I'm just like, whatever. Like, I'm not, just this kind of, this trio of colors I am, I just don't care about. No, my least favorite is my actual least favorite, which I actively do not like.
Well, let's hear it.
Naya, easily.
Ooh,
it's
shots
not even
fired.
It's not remotely close.
Is it because the cards aren't good or because they don't do anything cool?
They're okay. How many cards that have white, green, and red mana cost in them exist in Magic, do you think?
I've done this Scryfall search.
12.
Like if it's just those and you don't allow for 4 and 5 color cards, it's
just those.
It's like 1 page of search results. And
okay, I'm gonna look right now on Scryfall exactly these colors. There's 41 cards, which is actually significantly more than I thought.
It's still not a ton though. You can skip over most of them.
Yes. This is like, it's just, first of all, most of them are from Shards of Alara block. And you have like the Hallmark card from that block, and this really just sums up how I feel about this color combination, is Woolly Thoctor, which is just a giant vanilla creature.
Right up there with Leatherback Baloth.
Yeah. Right. Sure. Right. I mean, if that's a comparison we want to make, yes, right up there with Leatherback Baloth.
It is.
It is. I mean, they're basically the same. They're having the standoff across the battlefield from each other, and they were like, "We didn't think that you would come with a vanilla creature of this size today."
Same era.
Yeah, they were in standard at the same time. Anyway, but because of that, I enjoy like looking through this, because this is like, I wouldn't put my brain in a scenario to be like, what would I want to make with a Bant cube? Like, that's not something that I would have thought about, just because it's low on my list of 3 color combinations. So I don't really know the point that I'm trying to make, other than saying I like it because I wouldn't have done it, and I'm glad it exists. Because when you have something that you're definitely not going to make, you really want someone else to make it.
Yeah, and we're talking about just the pool of what cube could be. When you see something that you just would never build, that's really interesting and really cool to see. For me, almost any cube I've worked on or even thought of, I have the least idea of what I'm going to do with green and white. So the idea of making a 3-color cube where 2 of the colors are green and white, I would never do that. Never in my life would I do that.
Yeah, I actively try to avoid having to do green and white as a color combination. And that's not my fault, okay? That's the Wizards' fault. They've had all this time. Look, they've been supporting allied colors for 28 years. Do something with green and white that's interesting. At
least like functionally reprint Abundant Harvest with a different name, so I could have 2 of those. Just get a little bit of a churn while you're thinking of the other ideas. Just let me double up. Give me a functional reprint of Thraben Inspector so I can get 1 more white card. There's some cool designs, and they're starting to pour out, but we still have a long ways to go.
And I don't want to say that there's nothing that is interesting that green and white does as a combination. I just think that it is not deep or wide. There are some cards that I think are interesting. I wish I could do like a +1/+1 counters theme, but it's really difficult to do, and I'm trying to do that. But it's always very difficult to do that unless you specifically kind of power down some of the other archetypes in whatever cube you're trying to do that with, almost regardless of power level.
I will say that Bant Cube, something that was really interesting is in a lot of the Magic Online cube, certainly in the Vintage cube, the aggressive decks would be mono red or mono white. and kind of by the nature of this cube, despite the fact that I just scrolled to the Celestia column, overwhelmingly, these cards are some of the worst cards in the cube, the cards that cost green and white mana. There's a couple standouts. Kitchen Finks is awesome. Love Kitchen Finks. Shalai, Voice of Plenty, is a pretty awesome tool for those decks. And it also hoses Settle the Wreckage, so some points there. And despite the green-white cards, the gold cards being pretty underwhelming, the beatdown decks often were green and white, just because both of those colors were where you got your aggressive creatures outside of your artifacts. Blue contributed very little. And so it's different from what you usually see, which was part of what makes it cool. But I was really surprised and kind of impressed by the way a lot of the green-white beatdown decks curved out in this cube, which is something you don't see a lot of in other cubes.
Now, I know you're saying that the green-white cards are bad, and I'm not disputing that. However, as a counterpoint, can you name green-white cards that exist that are better than the ones that are here?
I certainly was not trying to make a point that this column could have been done better with cards that exist.
Okay.
So if that's what anybody heard, that is not what I intended to say. Celestia cards are just horrible.
I did not believe that is the point you were trying to make, but I did want to clarify.
Yes.
That this is mostly what you are kind of getting.
Mm-hmm. I could go for a Voice of Resurgence. That's not in the queue. I think that card is actually pretty good, especially with blue being such a significant percentage of cards in the cube.
Okay.
So that's like the one Celestia card that I actually like that isn't present.
I know why I like Celestia. Green and white is my least favorite color combination easily. I think I've identified the reason why as in my history. Ryan, are you familiar, and I know that you are you familiar with a simple card called Anurid Brushhopper?
I am, yeah.
I was a believer in Anurid Brushhopper, and as time went along, the world just continued to go on, and we continued to get variations of power level adjacent Anurid Brushhoppers in green and white. And I think for the most part, while mechanically they're very different, those cards are still being printed today.
So there's a deck list of mine that you can find on the internet. I top 8'd a regionals in Minneapolis in, I want to say it was 2015. And my deck was no win conditions of Grixis control. I'm pretty sure I had 4 Snapcaster Mage and 3 Delve creatures, or maybe 4. Tasigur and Gurmag Angler, maybe just Tasigurs. Maybe a Vendilion Click. But my deck was all Mana Leaks and Terminates.
Yep.
That was the deck. It was just Snapcaster Mage, do
Sounds
nothing.
Great.
And in like round 6, I was either 4-1 or 5-0. And I played against somebody playing green-white anti-blue. Their deck was Voice of Resurgence. They woke up this
morning and they're like, we're not losing to blue today.
They woke up this morning and said, I hate blue. They had Voice of Resurgence, Loxodon, Smiter, Wilt, Leave, so the anti-discard stuff as well. My deck wasn't really doing that. But anti-counterspell, creatures with 4 toughness, so they're good against Lightning Bolt. They boarded into Choke. They boarded into Rest in Peace, and I 2-0'd them. Celestia is fucking horrible. It's unplayable. Like, it's actually kind of remarkable. There was a period in modern history where Abzan was actually arguably the best deck. And it was an era where Splinter Twin was legal. Like, there was a brief window where Abzan was like very significant. But
or you
outside
mean
of very
you played in a
brief
PTQ
windows.
and like the Abzan player was undefeated in like round 6?
If you played in any PTQ, it was you were unlikely to dodge the Abzan matchup at one point in modern history.
I'm gonna have to believe you skeptically.
Yeah, I don't have the data in front of me, but I can track it down. It was like I don't want to say anything that's wrong, but I do remember this era, and I'd have to track it down and come back to it.
I will say that this card is lacking my favorite white and green cube card, which is actually a relatively new one, but it's Tristani Discordant. I'm a big fan of that card.
Yeah.
That one's not here, which is, it's okay. I'm not mad about it.
Nice little anthem. One thing is there's also no control magic effects. So that's one thing that Tristani does, is it turns off treachery and control magic. In general, though, just casting it on curve, it is very powerful in that role.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. Anyway, did you have fun playing this cube?
I definitely had fun playing that Yorion deck. And there were a number of things. Like, this cube generated some pretty cool moments. That Mentor versus Settle the Wreckage game, I really loved that. I was kind of pounded in the chest when that happened. So that was really cool. And just the general experience of this being something that I would never build myself was very cool. And I also am very happy for Autumn being able to display their cube on Magic Online. That's something that I think that Autumn is very deserving of. So it's awesome to see people like Autumn get recognized in this way.
Oh, yeah, fully agree with that. Okay, any parting thoughts on the Bant cube before we move on to our next one?
I think that if you were interested in building this cube yourself and playing it with your friends, the Tolarian Academy is the one card that Autumn would cut just on power level. Personally, I don't like Settle. I don't like Sublime Epiphany. I did play some games where it felt like Sublime Epiphany was the only thing that mattered, as I often do when that card is in a cube. But just from Autumn herself, the Academy is the one to watch out for here. But pretty cool engine building cube if you're into that sort of thing, either way.
Okay. All right, I like it. So, notes from Ryan, especially if you are inviting Ryan to play a draft, cut the Academy and add in a second Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah. And maybe make like a Sublime Epiphany Settle the Wreckage split card.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to make it a split card. You just put one on one side, one on the other side now. You just do that.
Or just make it an extra mode on Sublime Epiphany.
Oh, there. All right, we figured it out.
That card's very good. Do you know why? Because it has 6 modes.
Okay. That is all for the Bant Cube. We're going to take a quick break to tell you about some sort of advertising that we're going to be doing. It's going to be Ryan and I doing it. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll be back in just a moment.
Listen up, gamers. I have some huge news. If you haven't heard, the SCG Tour Online is back, and we're giving away cash prizes, tens of thousands of MTG Arena gems, MTG Arena Qualifier Weekend invitations, MTG Arena Championship invitations, and the big one, Star City Games Invitational invitations. You heard that right, the Invitational is back, and that's going to be at SCG Con. SCG Con is back, taking place Halloween weekend. That's October 29th through the 31st in the Star City. That's Roanoke, Virginia. And you can qualify for the Star City Games Invitational via the SCG Tour Online. Stay tuned for more details on that. Those will be coming soon. And for more information on the SCG Tour Online, head over to scgtouronline.starcitygames.com. Now back to the pod.
All right, second up on the docket, we have the Temur Cube, and this is Elizabeth Rice's also restricted to 3 colors cube.
Yes.
Now this one I will admit is slightly more up my alley than the Bant Cube, and is certainly more willfully aggressive than the Bant Cube.
Oh yeah. I mean, this cube's definitely up my alley. It has 2 steam vents. Sign me up.
That's true. Yeah. So, notably, we do have some duplicates, primarily in the land section. There's a couple of each of the shock lands and the actual factual dual lands. So 2 steam vents, 2 volcanic islands, 2 stomping ground, 2 taiga, 2 breeding pool, 2 tropical island, and I think the same is with the fetch lands. Yes, the same with the fetch lands. So 2 wooded foothills, 2 scalding tarn, and 2 misty rainforest.
Mm-hmm. And then the power level on this one is still quite high. So this is the second time that Temur Cube has been featured on Magic Online. the first go round, the only actual piece of power in the cube by name and title is Time Twister.
Mhm.
However, the first run, the cube had Mana Crypt and it had Mana Drain.
Yeah.
And you still see a number of very high power cards, but some of that's been toned down. So Time Twister is still in the cube, but the Crypt and the Drain, they're gone. So it's been brought back down to a power level where you can play more interactive games. Though those cards tend to have a very reductive effect on games. Where I remember the first time this cube was on Magic Online, played a few games where my opponent led on the turn 1 Mana Crypt, some spell, and those were the reevaluate tomorrow morning if I still want to play Magic kind of cube drafts.
Yeah.
Where things were a lot more tame this go around, definitely improved. Channel was added, and part of that was because green does not perform as well as the other two colors. Based off of my experiences drafting this cube, I have some thoughts on that. A little bit of it is what we mentioned earlier in the show. Green is Magic's least interactive color, and then blue-red typically leads to either combo decks where you kind of need to interact or kill them first, where you just don't always have the option for the second thing. And part of the reason you don't always have that option is because those decks tend to be highly interactive. It's really difficult for a base green deck to compete with an Izzet deck, just kind of categorically, unless you can get a big creature, a high toughness creature off the ground and have the game be about that. But that's also difficult because blue has some of those control magic effects, and blue also just has access to some of its own big creatures and clones and a lot of things about that. And I think that the major thing that actually makes green struggle in this cube is there's a lot of cards that are actively just very good against the green decks, and specifically against the green decks. Pyroclasm and Anger of the Gods are cards that you can just like play any deck. They're not great. However, if you draw them in the early game against the green decks that are all mana elves, you can just demolish them. Oath of Druids is also a new update to the cube, and I think the position there was this is a powerful green card. However, it didn't really go in green decks, at least not heavily green decks, because you don't want to play it with creatures. So it just showed up in 3-color combo decks that were very good against the green decks. So you have just a number of cards that are really predatory against green. And kind of the loudest manifestation of this I saw, I drafted a deck. It was kind of wild. It was an Oath of Druids deck. My creatures were Primeval Titan and Uro Titan Nature's Wrath. Like I had no giant creature. Those two were the things I could hit off of Oath. And then I just played Pyroclasm in my deck because it made sense I wasn't playing creatures. And I was a Nexus of Fate deck, which is part of why I wanted to mill myself with the Oath of Druids. And then either of those Titans would help me get to the mana to take infinite turns. Exactly. And I got stomped when I played against a blue deck. But the other two matches, I just played against green decks. I didn't even go off. I just killed every creature they played. And so the green decks just didn't feel competitive, even though my deck was kind of funky, kind of had some difficulty doing what it was trying to do, which was kind of ambitious on its face, kind of a silly deck. But the red removal spells just made it really easy for me to keep pace with the two green decks I played against. And it was a pretty easy 2-1, even though the loss was a match I was never in.
Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunity for non-creature based decks in this cube. Obviously, significantly more so than the Bant cube, but even though these are, and the only reason I bring that one up is because this is also a 3-color cube, but to illustrate the extreme differences that you have when replacing just a single color with another color, what you are really opening up as far as what that means for the makeup of the cube and the archetypes available. There's a lot of non-combat oriented decks that I believe you can draft in this cube.
There's a ton of combos, and then also you end up, the Bant cube had a lot of engine building decks, whereas Temur cube has a lot of just haymaker control decks.
Yeah.
You get into a ton of just tap out stuff that it gets you into a powerful late game, which is a very significant departure.
Yeah, I'm just going through and just looking at some of the, And when I say non-combat oriented, I'm not counting Splinter Twin as a combat oriented card, despite you requiring to go through combat to win the game.
Yeah.
But there's just a ton of just huge mana things, and it's really encouraging you to cheat on rather than to simply get to 8 mana to cast Amanatu's Augury, or any number of these other things to get to 10 mana to cast Omniscience, to try to cheat some of these things onto the battlefield with fast mana or through, Turnabout or High Tide, etc., just to make sure that you are sidestepping the traditional cube deck as much as possible, which I actually like, because you have a color that is in green that is not as engaged in that so much, although it does have a handful of cards that are really, really green cards by mana cost only, and are functioning as the combo cards that happen to be green. Something you mentioned, Oath of Druids, but even something just like Regrowth or Tooth and Nail, that are pushing you more towards, and Noxious Revival, that are pushing you more towards a combo oriented function of the cube, and are still contributing as one of the 3 colors that exist in the cube as a whole.
Yeah, and cards like Tarmogoyf, to a greater extent, Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, where, you need green mana early, and for Uro, you are going to need a good number of green sources, but these cards are not showing up next to Llanowar Elves generally. They're facilitating other styles of decks.
Yeah, this is going to sound like a dunk on white, but it's not really meant to be, but I like basically all of the multicolored cards in this cube comparatively, but I think that's kind of just the factor of, we talked about the green-white cards, but the Gruul cards are all very pushing aggression, and then there's, actually pretty much all pushing aggression. There's, you have a Manamorphose, but other than that, the Izzet cards are all really, really spell slingy, that are all about casting instants and sorceries and doing direct damage and quick damage. And then the Simic cards are just all ramp and value. And I don't know, I really like that, even though it's pushed really hard in a singular direction for each of these, I think that being able to combine these amongst each other is probably pretty fun, because you're not going to be in situations where, if you try to do a straightforward deck, that you're going to miss. And from a design perspective, you want those to be the case, because when you need some amount of people to say, I'm going to do the Gruul deck, I'm going to do the Izzet deck, I'm going to do the Simic deck. Because when people are doing those decks, that is taking them away from the possibility of drafting the more interesting, maybe not interesting, but the more sideways archetypes, because you don't want people taking, I don't want to be like, well, I'm drafting this blue deck, maybe I should be drafting High Tide. No, you can just, you want to say, no, here's these simple, straightforward decks. Please draft these, because the power level of these cards are enough to allow you to win games. But because of that, it allows space for these other non-traditional decks to exist. And that it looks very simple. And I think it probably sounds easy to just say, well, let's put all of the most powerful cards for these 2 color combinations in the cube. And maybe it is, but making sure that those exist and are not narrow, but are not going crazy into the non-traditional stuff, to allow that stuff to exist from a draft perspective. And I think that's really nice in this cube.
Yeah, I also think that, just given the power level of mono blue and mono red in this cube, again, green maybe has some difficulty, particularly just based off of the adversarial elements of the cube. But in mono blue, you get your cryptic commands. This cube does have Mystic Confluence. You have Sublime Epiphany and Nexus of Fate also in this cube. And the mono red deck, you just have all the best 1-drops, including your new baddies, Dragon Rage Channeler and Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, to shine some light on my experience playing the cube. When I first started playing, I did try mono green a couple times. I dropped one league at 0-2 and played to a 1-2 the other time I drafted it. I drafted mono red twice and just 3-0'd both times. And I think that when you have the monocolored decks, and hopefully if we see this cube again, when we see this cube again, the green deck will be a little bit more competitive with the other two colors. But when your monocolored decks, at least your mono blue and your mono red, have such heavy hitters and such powerful archetypes, you really do just need a lot of your gold cards to be powerful enough, at least to contend with those specific cards.
Yeah. I think that it is possible to get green there. You know how we were talking about in the Bant cube where it makes sense to not have Gaia's Cradle and Tellurian Academy. They're present in this cube, but I actually think that they make way more sense here, specifically the Cradle, because Cradle is a very good card if you are just playing creatures. But in this cube, if you are playing a creature deck, you're going to be playing a green deck. And it helps kind of push the power level of the more green, like mono green centric stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cradle, I think, is definitely good to keep around. I would like to see some of the top of green and red trim. And maybe it is as simple as removing some of the adversarial cards. Like, it's a little tough because a lot of these cards are just good against mono red. Because if you cut Pyroclasm, that's a card that a red controlling deck would have possibly main deck or to sideboard against the red aggressive decks. It's a tool to keep that in check. I also think that Ether Gust is kind of backbreaking against the green decks on occasion. But then that's another card where you do want it to fight with the high-powered red deck. So you can run into some balance difficulties when you push certain things to extremes in Cube. I mean, you just necessarily end up with a wide power band when you have some historically powerful cards and you go to 540 total cards. There's just not 540 incredible, you would main deck this card every time cards in Magic. At least not in the same top of the power band. It just doesn't work out that way. I do think this cube is very fun to play, and I did really enjoy, actually the most fun that I've had playing a cube on Magic Online in the last year or so. I just had this Temur deck that was just really scrappy, and it was 3-color beatdown. My mana was fine. My cards kind of sucked, but like if they came together the right way, made me really happy to see Sprite Dragon next to Brush Fire Elemental. Like something about playing those two cards in the same deck really speaks to me. You like queue off spells and your spells help you hit your land drops. Expressive Iteration like just kind of holds those two cards together. I think that deck's really sweet. And again, that's something, you can see all three of those cards in some other cube, but it's kind of difficult to go that deep into Gruul to have a card like Brush Fire Elemental in a cube that's otherwise this powerful without having that color restriction. Just because you only get 5 or so Gruul cards in your Legacy or your Vintage cube. And your green cards are like your Llanowar Elves. Like this was very much not a Llanowar Elf deck, right? This was like a funky beatdown deck. And so you do open up some of these kind of weirder identities with some cards that are very cool you don't see very often when you get into the color restrictions. And I really enjoyed that draft a lot.
Something that I would be very interested in finding out the answer to is in this cube, you still have the kind of the package of like Steel Overseer and Metalworker, and where it's like kind of suggesting that there is a deeper like artifact theme, but a lot of the artifacts and the colorless cards are really sewn up in like very expensive things. I mean, you see a full, and I mean full section of cards, like really half of the artifact creatures or the colorless creatures in this cube are 5 mana or greater.
Mhm.
So you're really kind of the Steel Overseer and Mirror Retriever are really kind of operating in a different type space in this cube, where it is not as aggressive as it is trying to cheat artifacts into play, which makes sense because blue and red is a color combination. That's something that is more logical. But blue is pushed more for the artifact theme, where it's kind of left off where you're really going to need to be in like a mono blue artifact deck for that to work. And it's difficult for me to just assess the capability of how competitive that deck could be if you got what you wanted just looking at this list.
It's kind of
I'm having trouble doing that.
To square having Tinker and Steel Overseer in the same cube, because you're not getting the most out of one of them. Right? But one of these cards is subverting player expectations, and I didn't see a ton of Tinkers on this run of the cube. I think I went 2-1 with the Tinker deck I drafted, but had that classic experience where Tinker for Blightsteel, the game is over. And that definitely happened to me at least once.
Yeah.
But the opposite of Bant Cube, Steel Overseer in this cube did not get to live and activate too often.
Yeah.
To the extent that people even played it. I don't even really remember playing against an artifact aggressive deck. You miss some stuff on volume here. There is a Hardened Scales deck in here, but you don't have that white artifact beatdown deck.
Yeah, but Hardened Scales is mono green and a touch of artifacts here.
Yeah, exactly.
Really minimally.
Yeah, and the blue artifact cards tend to be the more go big stuff. There's not really the incentive to go really low to the round artifact deck there.
Yeah, those are just things that I'm observationally looking at. Yeah, I would not imagine that there's gonna be too much success with an aggressive artifact based deck. But I think there's a little bit of the groundwork here, and that, you know, when you're working with a 3-color cube, 540 cards, there's still a lot that can be adjusted. But I would be very interested to see what the win percentage was on those decks, and what were the successful ingredients on those, or maybe they weren't. Maybe that was consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be cool to see what a successful Steel Overseer deck looks like. I suspect that I would bet against that deck performing consistently in this cube.
Yeah, I think I would too.
But from this one, I mentioned that this being the second run of Temur Cube, outside of kind of tightening on some of those power level outliers, there was actually just a lot of changes from the first run of this cube to this Temur Cube 2.0. And it changed the balance a little. I believe that there used to be more total blue cards by 10 or more cards on the other colors. So the colors are more balanced now. Mm-hmm. The power level is a little bit more tame. I do think there's still some work to be done in green, though I think a lot of it can be done in the other columns. I think kind of getting rid of some of the really beat you over the head counter spells. It's just kind of tough for green decks to compete with Mystic Confluence, outside of being green-blue decks themselves, which, you know, maybe it's just fine. You accept that green has to kind of be a support color. At that point, though, I think you might even want to mess with the balance more and get rid of some of the green cards that would push you into mono green, just to kind of disincentivize people even trying. I don't know. Obviously, they have the actual data. I only have my anecdotes, but I just got my shit rocked when I tried green in this cube.
Yeah.
And I just demolished all the green decks I played against.
Yep. No, I mean, I can see that. Green is it is very, very straightforward. To the point where, do we know if this was a cube that was a smaller size and was needed to be sized up?
I don't believe so. No, I believe that Yeah. So I've talked to Ellie quite a bit about the Temur Cube, and much like actually with all three of our spotlight cube designers this week, Ellie and I have pretty different perspectives about Magic. And for Ellie, recent addition to the rules advisory group, or the commander advisory group, is that what it is?
That's the one.
Yeah, the commander advisory group loves wild swingy commander games, and you can see that really reflects in this design. You see a lot of big mana swingy cards, and if your perspective is coming in as a predominantly a commander player, you don't really have as much of an eye or appreciation or concern about the balance, where it's like, okay, well, the green deck can never beat Pyroclasm because the way commander games play is largely different, where it's, you get into trouble with the other players if you beat up on the green player. It's not something that really happens in Cube. And
yeah, there's nobody to bail you out. There's no there's no politics. There's no like people distracting other people while you can like develop in the middle of the game to start slamming these gigantic things. No, it's people interacting with you from point zero, and it's hard. It seems like it's harder to get off the ground here.
When you are down in the hole, the beatings will continue, is how it goes in a 1v1 cube game. And I definitely appreciate the desire to have all these swinging effects together and to really push that power level. Because if you really love playing Sublime Epiphany, you're going to want that to be in the cube. But then you kind of start seeing in the heads up matchup, the way people draft, the way the decks come together, the green deck does just kind of struggle heads up, while the green deck can contribute meaningfully to the 2 and 3 color decks. And there are a lot of very powerful green cards. And in fact, adding channel, it's going to bump up the green win percentage some, because you do just have some of those runaway games with channel. But the balance is still kind of going to be off. When you get into those best cards ever printed, how many does green have? You also have that problem where Oath of Druids is a very good green card. It just beats up on the green decks more than the other colors and gets splashed. Yeah. So it's not really a good green card. Blue gets a bunch of them. And even though the red cards aren't necessarily as powerful as the blue or even the green cards, they just kill all the green creatures. And doesn't matter how good your cards are if they all die and you can't cast the rest of them.
I think the Temur Cube is a worthwhile kind of test to try to get this right. Because I mean, obviously I have not played the cube, but based on what I can see, I think that Ryan's assessment is correct.
I actually really love looking at the first run and then seeing the updates to 2.0. And I really hope that we do see this cube again.
Yeah.
And it would be awesome if we got a run where green suddenly was just there. Ellie was like, I'm going to figure this out. We're going to get a really awesome balanced cube experience. And we got another big sweep because the combination of both something you've tried before, like seeing the Temur Cube again was cool, but then it was also different enough. So it's kind of a unique experience there. And then getting another run of this and getting the balance even better next time would be really awesome to see.
I think it might be a case for this cube of some addition by subtraction and taking away some of the specifically like vastly detrimental cards, because you have in a Temur Cube, you have an enemy, you have a wedge, which means that you're going to have one color, blue in this case, that is going to have access to a wealth of cards that are good against red and green. And a lot of those are in this cube, Aether Gust, Flash Freeze, and the like. But what that ultimately does is you kind of position that color against the other two colors, but red doesn't care very much. So then those cards are just blue anti-green cards when blue is already being the most successful. And you're just kind of further burying it by having things. And I'm not even, this is not just specific to, Aether Gust and Flash Freeze, but Pyroclasm is actually another really great example. Pyroclasm, even like Bonfire of the Damned, where these are Bonfire of the Damned in this cube. This kills creatures, but all it does is kill green creatures.
Mm-hmm.
because the red creatures all have haste.
Yeah, and Bonfire is also just not really a card that you necessarily are trying to start in your mono red aggressive deck. So
Yeah,
at least for me, I generally sideboard that card, or it shows up as my 23rd card, and then it is specifically to hate on the Llanowar Elves decks.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like all of like the sweepers and the anti-green and red cards, like those I think they all just pick on green because red has by the nature of the color, which I think is good, red has more reach and it can just be like, all right, well, you interacted with me on this axis, you messed with my creatures, but I was able to get you low enough, and then I can kind of pick you off through the rest of the game. And then green, if you have cards with a similar mana cost, you're drawing a card, untapping, playing a creature, and passing the turn. And if you do that over and over again, red will win and green will not, and that will be pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So I like this cube, and I'm sure Ryan feels the same way, like only like, being hopefully constructively critical because we really like the idea of this cube and really want it to succeed. I also hope this cube can come back and make some adjustments to make green more competitive.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, and definitely make the caveat that I'm speaking from my own very small sample size. These are the drafts that I've done. But also just from observing other drafts, it seemed like that experience with, and Ellie did actually state herself in her article in the Mothership that in run 1, green definitely needed some help. This run was an attempt at doing it. And it does still feel like green does fall a little bit short. But again, I do like the cube quite a lot, and I do hope to see an updated version of it in the future.
Well, one thing that I personally know Elizabeth, she's both very smart and is very interested in getting better at things, which is a great combination. So I'm sure this cube is going to be awesome.
Yeah, and I suppose that given how much we talked up Autumn, it would be kind of shameful to not hype up Elizabeth. Yes, she is awesome. Very fun person, very smart, very hardworking. And I mean, that really just shows in how big the update was. Like, I'm not exaggerating. I'm pretty sure that 100 cards were changed from run to run.
Yeah, that's awesome.
A lot of work went into this. And I know that Ellie does really care about the product, which is really cool. And somebody who's very invested in Magic, someone's really excited about Magic. So also very cool to see Ellie featured in this capacity for the Spotlight Cube series.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that this is, having a chance to, one, like I said, I know her personally and I've worked with her professionally. And she, she's someone I would describe as bust their ass. Mm-hmm. And she's going to go and take all of this data and pour over it and continue to try a bunch of things. And there's not going to be a rest to get this right. And I'm 100% sure of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any parting thoughts on the Temur cube?
I gotta say, as opposed to Bant, Temur is a wedge that holds a very special place in my heart. My 2 open wins are actually with Temur decks, even though kind of a self-ascribed Grixis mage, progenitor of the Grixis cube. But Temur Delver and Temur Phoenix, those are my 2 SCG trophy decks. So Justin shared his least favorite 3-color pairs. It is important for me to shout out Temur. I do love Temur.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. In that case, we are going to take one final break and be back in just a minute to break down our last cube. Have some extra cards laying around that you want to get rid of? Go to starcitygames.com/sell. It has never been easier to turn your cards into cash, or if you're looking to outfit your cube or commander deck with some new favorites, get a 30% trade-in bonus when you choose store credit. No matter what your collection looks like, we have a method for you. Want to see exactly what every card you have is worth? Check out our buy list. Don't have time for that? Stick it on a box. Send it to us, and we'll make you an offer with our ship and sell program. Or if you want a more personal touch, make your way to the Star City Game Center in Roanoke, Virginia to sit down with a buyer just like the old days. With the fastest turnaround time in the industry, get an offer in under 4 days when you go to starcitygames.com/sell. Selling has never been easier.
What's up, gamers? Taking a break from the pod here to talk to you about Star City Games Premium. Now, I know many of you are already Premium members. That's awesome. You're awesome. Thank you for that. If you are not already enrolled in SCG Premium, we need to talk. You are leaving a value on the table for $7.99 a month. You get access to 5% off of Magic Sealed product, 10% off of all Magic singles, 15% off of supplies. Now, I know that I'm talking to a lot of Cube owners here. I know that you're going to buy more sleeves. You know you are going to save this money right back on sleeves alone. So that's reason enough for you to enroll. But I am not done yet, not by a long shot. You also get tons of exclusive content from a fantastic stable of writers. We're talking about Jerry Thompson, Paulo Vitor Rosa, Patrick Sullivan, Autumn Burchette, Brad Nelson, Sheldon Memory, Ross Merriam, Todd Anderson, Shaheen Sarani, Michael Majors, Ryan Sachs, Ari Lax, Dominic Harvey, Cedric Phillips. The list goes on and on. My stuff, you can get that every week for free. You're welcome. But now I am asking a favor. Go ahead, get enrolled for SCG Premium. Go to starcitygames.com/join-premium. Sign up today. And let's get back to the podcast.
All right, cube number 3 today. We have a Bant cube down. We have a Temur cube down. And now we're going to go in the other direction and do something a little more traditional, or maybe something a little more classic, you could say.
Ooh.
Good. Ryan Sachs, fellow Star City Games content creator, writes about Limited quite a bit, has our last cube for today, which he is calling the Classic Cube. Also 540 cards, mostly legacy power level. And this is obviously the most standard looking cube, has all 5 colors featured, and nothing that is, there's no duplicates of cards. Like I said, the most regular, normal looking cube that we have today. But Ryan, who has played this cube, is there more lurking beneath the surface here?
I think that you'll find that the experience drafting this cube is largely similar in texture to a legacy or vintage cube. And it's because you do see a lot of the usual suspects, the high power level legacy cards. And there's a little bit of bleeding into vintage cube. There's not outright power here. There is actual time twister. So you get that, the ninth piece, the honorary piece of power does show up in the cube. But this is a cube that features mana drain. And so the power level is very pushed. It's going a little bit beyond what will be legal and legacy constructed. You do see a number of cards banned there. So it's kind of like going for the highest power level without playing Moxen is very much the vision for this game.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference in philosophy between Ryan Sachs and I about Cube, where I really like a lot of nuts and bolts stuff. And if you take a look at the cube list for his Classic Cube, so much of this cube is dedicated to endgame, which a lot of people love. I think that he actually did a great thing for making this cube really widely appreciated. I see so many screenshots of people playing Splinter Twin combo decks, playing the Persist infinite combo decks, either infinite damage and or infinite life, and getting like really giddy decks that hybridize both. I saw a screenshot of somebody going off with Persist combo with Kiki Pestermite in hand. Like people
that actually
eat that
Ryan?
stuff up. Ryan retweeted it. It was somebody else, but I could totally see him drafting that.
Those are his 2 absolute favorite things that you can do in any cube that could possibly exist.
And
his Persist combo and Splinter Twin combo.
Yeah, he tweets about them a lot. Like he tweets about Cube like all the time. He's very passionate about Cube. So even before this was announced, before this week, where he's been retweeting a lot of screenshots of other people's decks and games, he tweets about Cube regularly. He'll have some curiosity how people are feeling about putting some card in. And even though he and I disagree a lot on a lot of the philosophy of Cube, I have to admire his passion and dedication to Cube. And something I will say about the Classic Cube, it does a great job of having a playable bottom half of the cube. despite these power level outliers, because even though I'm not necessarily interested in drafting a lot of the cards, and when I say bottom half of the cube, that's just a numbers thing. Like half of the cube does have to be the bottom half. That you have mana drain in the cube, okay? Like everybody understands that. I'm not dogging on it.
If there's 2 cards, there's a top half and a bottom half.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but he does a good job of making the bottom half compelling in some way, and some of it is going really redundant on these combo decks. If you go heavy on endgame, some decks can suffer from having too much endgame, but he does offer redundancy in some ways where it's actually beneficial to play it. I personally can't really see myself playing a Worldly Tutor. Maybe I could play Worldly Tutor, but the sorcery speed one, I am not so much into. Sylvan Tutor.
Sylvan Tutor?
Yeah. But I can definitely understand why somebody would play Sylvan Tutor, and I can see Sylvan Tutor being part of a successful persist deck.
Yes, I think that is exactly why it is there.
Yes. And so it's all this stuff that, yes, I understand how you'd play this. I totally understand how you would win with this. So this cube actually does a really good job, despite having power level outliers and just a lot of the most powerful cards in Magic. I still see a compelling case for playing basically every card in the cube.
Yeah, so the thing that I like about Ryan's ideology, and I will say that when it comes to cube design, we are quite far apart. I am much more of a interaction. I want everyone to have a chance to play, and Ryan wants to have people assemble the combo. Mm-hmm. And I think that is, I think in general for Magic, this is what makes Magic great, because we're working with largely the same card pool, but if you change 50 cards, you have an entirely dramatically different cube experience, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. But I really like that a lot of what this cube is about is people, both in the draft and in a game, working towards assembling the thing that they have put together to try to do. And then if the other player does not have one of those things themselves, they're trying to run out the clock for their opponent. Mm-hmm. And I think that this cube does a very good job at doing that, both at allowing opportunities for people to try to put together the thing, whatever the thing is, whether it's Splinter Twin combo, whether it's Persist combo, whether it is, it's like a upheaval deck, or if they're trying to chain together like time warp effects to, they're waiting to get like planeswalkers or something where you can chain together time warp effects. There's a lot of those type of things that you can do, like Reanimator is here. And all of the cards, the rest of the things, you are able to stop that or stifle that, both from the aggressive deck perspective, but also through interaction. And it kind of looks like this makes for a fun mini game on like a per game basis. If like once you identify like what your opponent is trying to do, for you to try to either stop that or kill them before they can do it. And I think that's pretty indicative of how, like, honestly, like real life Legacy works. So I think this is a very appropriate cube to kind of bear that power level.
Yeah, and everything you just described generates this environment. We're starting on turn 1. Things are very tense because there's a lot of ways that your opponent can untap and end the game.
Yeah, shit could pop off real fast. And
despite the fact that I didn't dip too much into the combos, I did have a turn 3 win in this cube. I played turn 1 Carrion Feeder. My opponent played a land. I played turn 2 Putrid Goblin, the Persist Goblin. They played turn 2 Magmatic Channeler. No, they were actually on the play. So they played Magmatic Channeler. I played Putrid Goblin. Then they played 3 Mana Rock, tapped out for Sleight of Hand, left up the Channeler. I cast Grum Gully. So at this point, I do have an infinite Carrion Feeder. So Carrion Feeder, you sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. The Putrid Goblin persists. The Grum Gully makes it enter with a +1/+1 counter, so those cancel out, so I can sacrifice it any number of times. and I just attacked, and they blocked my Putrid Goblin, and they died. And so there's a little give and take with how tense it is. I mean, if you're not up to date, if you didn't read the script and you don't know how tense the cube is, you are liable to just dying sometimes on the board. But well, once both players are up to date on that, it generates some really tense games.
So a thing that I specifically want to talk about here is something that Ryan has been tweeting about a lot. And I'm glad that he is, because I think this is worth talking about. And in this cube, there are a number of lands, there's 10 of them in fact, that sacrifice themselves after some amount of uses, whether that be one use or two uses. And I know that for a lot of people like to play mid-range. I'm one of those people, I'll admit. And purposefully getting rid of resources to advance yourself a little bit is something that I think a lot of people are having difficulty wrapping their minds around. If watching Ryan's Twitter account is any indication, that is largely the case, where people do not really want to take these sacrificing lands. But I really like their inclusion here, because it puts more tension on those decks that are trying to do a thing that is a larger mana requirement. Because if you have those early, especially if it's the Marcadian Mask ones like Surprise and Scary, which is the blue one, basically these are the depletion lands that come into play, tap to 2 depletion counters on them. You tap it, remove a counter, make 2 mana of that color, and if once the counters are gone, you sacrifice it. So you can do that 2 times. But it's a fun. I think there's a lot of really fun tension from a design standpoint of, well, if I have these early, like I've built this with my specific deck in mind to try to jump ahead on a turn. However, if I'm forced to use it, then I'm going to be significantly behind and probably have to abandon whatever my initial plan was to try to not die. And I think that sort of tension in this cube, where it's present in those lands, and just the general makeup of like trying to do the combo, whatever your combo is, but to try to do that, I don't know. I think it's a really great like combination of traditional cube elements, and then some, I don't want to say non-traditional cube elements, but maybe cube elements you find more in a vintage cube than you do in a legacy power level cube.
So at the risk of starting an argument with you and or Ryan Sachs, I want to say my piece about these lands, because I do think that there are decks in this cube they belong in. I do think that they are more specific than how he talks about them. And I do think they are generally in the bottom half of the cube, and largely because of the specificity. Mm-hmm. I think broadly the decks playing ABC Magic generally don't want to touch these. I
fully agree with that.
I gave the Hickory Woodlot a shot in a mono green deck that I went on to trophy with. After one match, I took it out. I just needed my mana sources untapped. And also, there's a big difference there. I wasn't playing combos. The big card in my deck was actually Umezawa's Jite. And because I had Jite and could generate mana very quickly, I can get Jite online very quickly, and then I couldn't lose to the creature combos. So I think that Umezawa's Jite actually, if you see this cube again, keep that one in mind, is actually, I think, one of the best cards in the cube with how many creature combos are available, and now it shuts them down. Good against the aggressive decks too. But anyway, Umezawa's Jite is great, more at 11. But once you are playing one of those creature combo decks, a deck that's trying to just get to a turn where you cast your spells, and by casting them all, you win the game, or maybe you need to have some kind of counterspell backup. More on just the side of casting a full persist combo in one turn, though. Then these lands actually become pretty high value for you, because you want to just find a window where you can do all that without being disrupted. And these lands, even though you take a turn off, it doesn't matter if you roll up the game all in one turn. And that bonus mana going on to win, that's going to win. Redundant statement is redundant. But I think that putting them in the ABC decks where you actually use the land twice and you cast like a 4-mana spell and a 5-mana spell. If your opponent doesn't sacrifice a land and they can trade with you in some capacity, it's devastating. So I do like what the lands add to the cube, but I think that the framing has to be around using them to do something broken, not using them to gain some minor advantage.
Oh no, I completely agree. That was the point that I was trying to make, which I guess I did not make well enough. I definitely agree that they're in the bottom half of the cube, but I think that is actually a positive, because when you are putting together a combo deck, those are going to be available for you because they will be left in the pack because the more traditional decks just will never want them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's a positive addition to the
cube.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was more going on just the conversations I had seen on Twitter, where they do have significant power level. I do think it is significant to be able to 1 or 2 turns ahead of time just cast your full combo and win the game.
The card Rite of Flame has significant power level, but you don't just play that in any deck.
Right. Yeah, I think that more illumination on the specificity would have been good for the broader cube audience.
Yeah. And I think that's good. So I appreciate you pointing that out to make that abundantly clear. But I absolutely agree with your assessment on those. I think from a design perspective, I think that they're good inclusions. They don't take up a significant number of slots, but based on what they are, they will be available if you want them. And I think that is a way to approach cards that constantly are the bottom 5 picks in a pack. That is a very positive way to design a cube, because as we've talked about before, things being in the bottom half, that doesn't mean that they're bad, but something will be in the bottom half.
Right.
You could take the 15 best cards in the cube, and if you put them in a pack, one of them will go 15th. And when you think about things like that, and you apply that to the broader approach to your personal cube design, you're going to have things that are going to be last no matter what. You could have designed the perfect cube, which I don't think is possible, but let's say that it is. You're going to have things that are going to go 15th. And even if that's a rotating thing, which hopefully if, with successful design, that will be the case, you don't have the same thing going last all the time. But because you're always going to have things that are going to go later in packs from a drafting perspective, you should utilize that to find areas that more specific decks want. So even though they might have a lower rate of play than a lot of the other traditional cards, when they show up, they're going to be highly valued by the decks that want them, and that's an excellent use for those slots in your queue.
And I actually did have the Grixis cycle of the depletion lands in the Grixis cube on Magic Online. And actually, after that, how they played at that cube, I ended up putting them in my 360 card build of the cube. They did not make it in the 180, but there's a style of deck that's not featured in this cube. I think that those lands are actually great for Storm, just for everything that I described. They're so good in decks that want to win that turn. So
the invasion ones are specifically because, even though they're only one use for the double mana, you can use them for a single mana an infinite number of times. So that doesn't punish you to play it on turn 1 and actually deploy spells on turn 2 and then turn 3 and then turn 4, try to win by sacrificing it, which I think is really good.
Yeah, but point broadly, great lands for combo. Make sure you're comboing if you're going to play them. And I think that people generally realize that they didn't want to play them in normal decks, because I did 6 drafts of this cube, and I did see these lands going consistently late. So I don't think I really have to speak to anybody overvaluing them. I don't think that those people really exist, but there is definitely an audience that's undervaluing them.
I would be really curious. Somebody I got 6 of these. I got 6 of these lands. No one wanted them. See, that's the type of cube game that I want to watch, because that person's deck would just be 0 or 100 every time. It's just gonna be, they're just can you imagine playing against someone in the first 3 turns of the game, they play a land that sacks for 2 mana, and you're just you're gonna know as the opponent, you're I'm gonna get fucking destroyed, or they're not gonna have a chance. I have 1 wasteland and I'm just gonna blow their world apart right now.
Depletion land, depletion land, depletion land, Carnage Tyrant.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, you laugh, but like
I've lost a shit like that. I've lost a shit like that.
Yeah, that's gonna. When you said Carnage Tyrant, you're gonna win. You're gonna win 95% of your games if you cast Carnage Tyrant on turn 3. I don't care. Like I don't. It doesn't really matter. Like the rest of the context.
That was the turn 4 play, to be clear. I guess if you had City of Traders, you can do it on 3.
Okay. All right. Turn 4. If you're on the play, that's probably still pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, they're not for everyone, and they shouldn't be, and that's okay. Okay,
Yeah,
like I said, something's gonna go 15th.
Beyond those specific lands, something I like about this cube is that there's just a high volume of mana fixing lands. You have ABU duels, fast lands, shock lands, creature duels, pain lands, fetch lands, some other stuff going on there, triomes. In my 6 drafts, I had good mana in all of my decks. And I love having good mana, and I hate having bad mana. And many of them, one of my trophies with the Jund deck just had some real good Jund mana. That was that combo Goblins deck. Really, there was some other stuff going on. It just happened to have that combo, and I was casting busted stuff like Grist and Duretti. So just some good Jund kill all your stuff with a combo on the splash. What was the... I trophy with that mono green deck with the Jite, and then my other trophy was a just totally broken blue red deck that actually had worse mana than my Jund deck. I only had 1 mana fixing land, but I had Mana Drain, Urza's Saga, Hull Breacher. Tweeted that deck. That deck ruled. So there's avenues to play solid 2-color decks that don't need that many lands, but a good clip of lands so that you can play very consistent 3-color decks, which I like a lot.
Okay, I like it. I can get down. There's there's like the 20% of this cube is lands. There's like 110 lands in this cube. Yep. Around there.
Yeah, Ryan loves utility lands.
Yeah, they are the dime a dozen here. That's not a bad thing, but there's a lot. Mm-hmm. So you can find them if you want. Yeah, I mean, I like this cube because this is I don't know. I think, well, I was gonna say this is a cube I would never build, but I think that I'm gonna ultimately build a 360 card powered cube, and honestly, I think that cube is going to look closer to this cube, but going to be powered. Because this cube is very like it's pushing it as basically as far as you can go without having Moxen and Recall and Lotus and a cube.
Personally, if I had a cube that looked like this, I would either go the full 9 and just power it, or I would scale back a lot. I've enjoyed playing this cube, and I've played 6 drafts. I've trophied half of them. So I feel pretty in tune with the play patterns. I do enjoy it. But I think what I enjoy about it is the similarities to Vintage Cube, and I would crank that up.
Yeah.
Or go heavily in the other direction, because there are a lot of cards that are kind of just like really deflating. I just keep finding more stuff that's horrible to do to your opponent with the Hull Breacher. Like I played against a mono white deck, and my opponent had Palace Jailer and Thraben Inspector, and I just Palace Jailer is kind of messed up, but it was just really funny the first time I saw them go to draw for Monarch, and I got a treasure token.
Palace Jailer's not messed up compared to Hull Breacher. It's not like hopefully they weren't like, all right, end of turn, Monarch trigger on the stack, I'm going to sacrifice this clue.
The clue that they did not sacrifice, but it was meaningfully shut off anyway. So they didn't give me the treasure, but they didn't get the card. But,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, poor mono white player just trying to, they're scraping by.
They didn't deserve it.
Trying to rub 2 commons together to draw 1 card.
Oh, that's another area where I'd probably turn it up in this cube. I think that's like kind of outrageous to say Mana Drain is fine, but then just not have a Danto Vanguard in the cube. We can at least get that. Even if I can't sell you on Moxen, can I at least sell you on a 2-mana 3/1? There's like some heavy themes going on in mono white, which I think is kind of cool. You have humans, and then you have a little bit of artifact. I guess that the Esper Sentinel's actually here just because it's a human. But the human aggro stuff, I know that I saw Ryan say on Twitter that the mono white deck was kind of the winningest deck in his cube at one point. But the optics of just having mana drain, but then scaled back mono white, I can't get my head around that. And I don't know. Maybe he has immaculate and bountiful data on that, but it does not pass the sniff test for me.
Well, I mean, maybe, I will be. Here's the thing that I am most looking forward to. As we had talked about previously, knowing that Ryan's cube is going to be featured, I am very much looking forward to this cube leaving Magic Online, Ryan having all of the data of what people drafted, and then seeing what he does with that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see 2 months after. I want to see 2 months later what this cube looks like, and then compare those two lists.
Definitely. That would be very cool to see. And I'd kind of be surprised if he didn't do that. I feel like we are going to get our opportunity to see that, which is very cool. And I will say that it was pretty cool that the 3 decks that I have trophied with in this cube were very different in texture. Like mid-range Jun with the combo finish, blue-red, just mid-range, and mono-green ramp. I haven't had the desire to draft white, which maybe the pendulum swung too far in the other direction. That I don't know. I've only done the 6 drafts. I haven't really seen people talking about the white decks. I've mostly seen people talking about combo decks, which are kind of a reason not to play white. And when I drafted an Izzet deck, I did first pick Champion of the Parish, but then I second picked Jace the Mind Sculptor, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yep. I guess my parting thought for this is, you had said a few minutes ago, if you're kind of in this spot with as you in the designer seat for this cube, you'd go the full way, push it, and actually put power in this cube and kind of finish off the suite of the most powerful cards: Moxen, Black Lotus, Adonto Vanguard, Time Walk, Ancestral Recall. And then the opposite was, well, or scale it back. Mm-hmm. Maybe the fact that this kind of lives in this unique space where it is literally like on the precipice of that, but is absent of those cards, does kind of make it a little more unique.
Oh, I completely agree. And I had intended to preface my statement in a way where that was kind of my point. I wasn't trying to say, I'm going to destroy this cube and build it better one of these two ways. My point was that it is cool that it exists in this space. I never would have gotten here.
Yeah. Now, I will say, and this is neither a good nor a bad thing, just an observation. I believe it would have been possible for you to show me this cube list, and if you gave me a multiple choice question with 10 options, and there were 9 people that did not make this cube, and then Ryan, who did make this cube, I probably would have accurately selected Ryan as the designer of this cube. And that's not a bad thing, but it is it is overwhelmingly consistent with Ryan Sack's hallmarks for what he likes to do with cube, right down to the Orcish Lumberjack.
Orcish Lumberjack rules. I mean, my interactions with Ryan have basically only been about cube, so I also can't really imagine failing to pick him.
Sure. Well, I like this cube a lot. Like I said, pretty far in the other direction as far as like for a legacy powered level on the combo focus, and in opposition to how Ryan feels, but that's exactly why I can appreciate this.
Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier, with how many people just won't shut up for 5 seconds about Splinter Twin being banned in Modern, I am positive that this cube gets a lot of wide appeal just by going really heavy on these 2-card combos, just these ways to end the game. Yeah. And like, even though the cube doesn't have Blood Moon, I know some most people are frothing about the Contagion decks too.
Yeah, Contagion is a messed up card, but look, I mean, maybe you should have been playing black. I would tell you.
I had a sick game against the Contagion deck. It was mono black, and they had like all the sticky creatures, Bloodghast, Scrap Heap, Scrounger. I think they had Gravecrawler. I know they had Bloodsoaked Champion.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a really weird start to the game where I killed their first 2 creatures with Seal of Fire and Pyrite Spellbomb. And this was in a sideboard game. I think this was game 3. Yeah, this was definitely game 3. They beat me with Contagion in game 1. Game 2, I just demolished them with Goblin Sharpshooter. And game 3, I killed their first 2 creatures. They use Animate Dead on something just like get on the board. So like writing's on the wall, if their hand's a little rough, they have like 3 or 4 cards. Like they probably have Contagion. I'm able to stick Jace the Mind Sculptor and keep a decent amount of loyalty on it. And they have a turn where like they get to a battlefield. They tap out for Contagion, and they have the creature the Animate Deaded, and they just cast Scrap Heap Scrounger. I untap, I bounce the Scrounger with Jace, and then I cast Murderous Redcap off of my Contamination lands. And destroyed the crappy creature left over. They sat the Contamination, and that game was over.
Yeah, that's good cubing right there.
Yeah, that ruled.
Yeah, I don't think we can top that story. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts on the classic cube, or would you like to leave it with that taste in everybody's mouth?
I mean, certainly no more stories. That one, like you said, it is hard to top. But Ryan Sachs, another of 3 very passionate people about Magic, about Cube specifically. Awesome to see him have his cube featured on Magic Online. As you expressed, can't wait to see what he does with the data he gets from this, what he learns from this experience. That'll be really cool to watch that unfold as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. All right. Yep. Big ups to Ryan. Super excited, happy that he's able to get his cube as one of the featured cubes. I'm sure we will hear all about it in an article once we're on the other side of this cube being. Probably by the time people listen to this, I think it will be gone for Magic Online.
Yeah, Legacy Cube will be back when this goes live.
Okay. All right. Okay. We want to thank everyone for listening and remind you to subscribe to the 540 on any of the following: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon, Stitcher, YouTube, your local podcast app, pretty much anywhere you can find noise that's coming out of a digital phone or computer. Just start typing it in, the 540, you'll find it. Leave us a review anywhere that it'll let you. Now, I don't want you to get confused. If you are in a search bar, that won't leave a review. I've heard from my mother, who has accidentally tried to do that. Not suggesting that anyone that is listening is a 65-year-old woman. That is,
that is literally Justin's mom.
It is literally my mom. Yeah. But it was actually from a screenshot. I was like, well, where did you try to search it? And it was just the bar, like your browser bar.
You know what? I gotta say, from my side of things, big ups to your mom for being able to figure out how to send a screenshot.
No. She took a picture with her phone of the computer screen.
Okay, well, you know what? It worked, didn't it?
It did. Anyway, leave us a review wherever you can. We would definitely appreciate it. You can find me at jparnell1 on Twitter, on my other podcast, which is Think Twice, by searching Think Twice MTG anywhere you can listen to this one. We talk about magic and pop culture. I actually talked about my cube in our last episode, kind of my first few drafts, what I had learned. Stephen Green is on that one. He was a part of that too. It has some insight. Stephen, while does not own a cube is also his favorite format, and he's quite passionate about that from a drafting perspective as well.
Yeah, he also has opinions about things.
everything he's ever experienced, and even things he hasn't experienced, sometimes more strongly. You can also find us on Commander Versus every Wednesday, StarCityGames.com and YouTube. Ryan, what about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Overdrive, as well as my articles on StarCityGames.com. When this goes live, I should have something up about the updates to the Magic Online Legacy Cube, which is live for 2 weeks. I generally write about all those Magic Online cubes. And I also have some top secret Tubert projects, which hopefully I can write about soon. But I got a lot of stuff in the tank. It's a very exciting time for me, and I hope you all as well. And you can find updates, maybe some cryptic foreshadowing on my Twitter at Ryan Overdrive.
Sweet. I look forward to it. Still mulling around that Jund Tubert I'm going to be working on.
You can do a lot with Jund, so I am curious to see where you end up.
I'm also equally curious to see where I end up as well. All right. Thank you all very, very much for listening. We don't quite have Innistrad Midnight Hunt coming out yet, so we got a few more episodes that we are raring to do before we tackle brand new Magic cards that like to come out every so often. But that's it. That's the whole show. Thank you all very much again, and we'll catch you next week.